Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast, the show where we break down the art and science of podcasting to help you create compelling, engaging, and professional sounding episodes. I'm your host, Christina, and today we're talking about something that's essential for every single episode you create: the structure. As podcasters, we often get caught up in the creative side of things, coming up with topics, interviewing guests, editing, etc. But if your episode structure is not solid, you could lose your audience before you even go to the good stuff. So today, we're going to walk through the three main parts of every great podcast episode: the introduction, the main content, and the conclusion. By the end of this episode, you'll have a clear roadmap for structuring your episode in a way that keeps your listeners engaged, intrigued, and coming back for more. So let's dive in. Here's what you want to include in your intro: a warm welcome. Start with a greeting that feels personal and inviting. For example, a simple "Hey there" or "Welcome back, friends" can make all the difference. Set the scene. Quickly introduce what the episode is about. Keep it brief but clear so the listeners know what to expect. Introduce yourself if needed. If this is one of your first episodes, briefly introduce yourself. Let the audience know who you are and why they should listen to you. This is especially important if you're providing advice or tips that could help them grow. Keep this section around 30 seconds to 1 minute. You want to get to the heart of the episode as quickly as possible, but you also want to create an inviting atmosphere for your audience. The main content. Now that we've grabbed all the listeners' attention with a strong intro, let's get into the main content. This is the heart of the episode where you deliver on the promise you made in the intro. But here's the thing: if you just dive into a topic without a clear structure, you might lose your listeners' interest halfway through. The main part of your podcast is where the real work happens, so you need to keep it organized and engaging. Let's break this into three easy to follow strategies of structuring your main content. One is organizing your ideas into sections. Instead of rambling through a long monologue, organizing your main points into distinct sections is the way. This makes it easier for the listener to following along and stay engaged. For example, in this episode, we're talking about the three parts of a podcast episode, so I've organized my content into three main sections: the introduction, the main part, and the conclusion. Second one is using stories or examples. People remember stories more than they remember facts or advice. To make your story stick, wave into the personal anecdotes or stories that illustrates the concepts you're talking about. Adding personal stories or listeners' questions can also make an episode feel more relatable and authentic. Third one is keep the pace interesting. The main content section can be the longest part of your episode, but that doesn't mean you have to drone on. Mix things up by changing your tone, asking rhetorical questions, or adding little sound bites or clips if applicable. You can also break things up by having multiple segments in your main part. Maybe you do a listener questions of the week or share a tip, then dive back into the main content. The conclusion. Alright, we're at the final piece of the puzzle, the conclusion. This is your last chance to leave an impression on your listener. And here's the thing: a lot of podcasters neglect their conclusion, thinking that once they've delivered the content, they're done. But if you skip this part or rush through it, you might be missing a huge opportunity. The conclusion is where you wrap everything up and leave your listeners with something to remember. Here's how you can do that. Summarize the key points. A good conclusion always recaps the main takeaways of the episode. This helps your listeners remember the important stuff. Include a call to action. Don't just say goodbye. Encourage your listeners to take action. This could be subscribing, leaving a review, sharing the episode, or checking out additional resources. And third one is end on a high note. Leave your audience with a memorable sign off. Maybe it's a quote or a teaser on the next episode, or just a fun closing line that fits the tone of your podcast. And there you have it, the three essential parts of every great podcast episode: the introduction, the main content, and the conclusion. When you nail all three, you'll keep your audience engaged, focused, and excited to come back for more. Thanks for tuning into today's episode of the podcast. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with a fellow podcaster and don't forget to subscribe. I'm Criselda and I'll catch you next time with more podcasting tips and tricks. Until then, keep listening and keep creating.